Game of Thrones Season 8 is likely going to leave the neck hairs on the back of your neck standing up. In this video, I want to talk about one of the most anticipated moments of Game of Thrones Season 8, that being, of course, the battle for Winterfell. Now, leaks aside, we all knew that the setup for this was laid early on in Game of Thrones Season 7. Remember how Sansa mentions to all her men that they should bring the supplies to Winterfell, and they should all start surrounding Winterfell for when the winter comes? Well, that, along with the fact that we have an army of dead, we all know there's going to be a massive battle at Winterfell. So in this video, I'm going to go over leaks that were sent to me over on Twitter through the DMs. Make sure you go and follow me at Sir_Hunts. But nonetheless, these leaks are meant to be taken with a grain of salt and are most likely horseshit. Here's your spoiler warning. Before we get started, please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 421. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then make sure every notification's turned on so that way you get alerted every single time we drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Also, please help me reach my subscriber goal of 50,000 before Season 8 begins. Okay, so jumping right into these leaks here. Now, this person actually sent me two separate versions, and what I'm going to be discussing in this video is part one because they're pretty in-depth. If you guys like it, and if we decide mutually as a whole while we're making this video that it's worth it, then we'll do a part two. The main reason why I was hesitant to even include it in this video is because the more details that a leaker is required to give, the more their whole story starts to fall the fuck apart. So, I just picked out the best parts for you. Now, this leaker begins by saying there are two separate major massive battles in Game of Thrones. There's several little skirmishes and maybe, just conflict between a few characters, but there's two big battles. The first one happens early on at the season, and this is the Battle of Winterfell. The second one is more like a Dance of Dragons, which everyone kind of expects. It's Daenerys versus the Night King on Dragonback, and that's going to happen later on in the season. But this first one happens in the very first episode. So he starts off the leak by saying the Night King sends 2/3 of his army to Winterfell. The giants and almost all of his White Walkers go with him, while he and Viserion go to Castle Black and kills the remaining Night's Watch members. He sets up camp there after burning down a small section of the wall. The section of his army that attacks Winterfell are extremely successful, mainly because Dany didn't take her dragons with her when she first arrived at Winterfell, so they don't show up until it's nearly too late. Now, obviously, they can, this is not in the leaks, but obviously the dragons can sense their mom is in danger, so I don't know if they would stay too far away, so this leak's already becoming holy Swiss cheese before we even get started. So anyway, continuing on here, Rhaegal dies in this battle while trying to take on a giant white. The scene is terrible, with the giant yanking Rhaegal from mid-air by his tail and pulling him to the ground. Before Rhaegal can recover and sort of roll back over and unleash the flame, another giant runs up along with a few members of the army of the dead and begin to stab him, while the giants repeatedly rip at and tear off, completely removing one of his wings. Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, and Sandor are just barely able to escape, flying off on an injured Drogon. They decide to fly to Dragonstone along with the survivors of the battle at Winterfell in order to parley with Cersei and give Drogon time to heal. As soon as they land, Jon Snow takes a small group and heads back north. Apparently, at some point during this massive battle at Winterfell, Arya, Sansa, Grey Worm, Jorah, Brienne, and Lyanna Mormont make it down to the crypts of Winterfell. They then, before they can really catch their breath, the Night King opens up the ground and the dead begin filing into the crypts. The group splits up and successfully escapes the Night King. It's not really mentioned how, but it just does mention that they end up escaping the Night King. Jaime has Sansa, Grey Worm, and Jorah with him and mentions how they should head back to his camp and form a search party in order to look for the others. After Jaime and Brienne depart from the camp, Sansa is noticed by one of the Lannister guards. He questions if she is Sansa of House Stark and that the Queen would pay him well to bring him the girl who betrayed the Lannisters. Sansa is then taken captive and they head to King's Landing. Okay, before we really move on to the next part, I just want to call, some obvious red flags that I saw there. The fact that Jon would somehow willingly flee Winterfell, even though he knows that, most of all of his family is there, I don't really see him doing that. It does mention that the battle's insanely paced and everything happens so fast that no one really gets the time to think things over, but Jon Snow's main motivation is his family. As a matter of fact, we could argue that that's his only motivation going into this final season. So why in the fuck would he just hop on Dragonback and fly off, leaving them all for dead? I don't think that's the case. I do like the part that he said that, Drogon is injured. Not that I want to see a dragon injured, but if this battle is going to be full scale, then obviously there's going to be some casualties. I would like to see Drogon survive until the very end. I would like to see all the dragons survive until the very end, but that's not going to happen. So I'll be happy with at least one direwolf and one dragon. Continuing on with the leaks here, now it's mentioned that the way this scene is set up, it's supposed to be happening at the same time that the confrontation between Sansa and the guards was set to be taking place. So we pick up with Arya fumbling through the woods, and it looks as though she may be injured, or she may have someone else's blood on her. We can't really tell, although she is struggling to walk. But just as she rounds a corner trying to catch her breath, Ghost shows up, and it's made apparent that Ghost is currently being warged by Bran Stark. Arya then limps over towards Ghost, and just as she grabs him for support, she's given a quick vision of flashes that shows Sansa talking to the guards. She quickly realizes what's going on, that, Bran's basically warging Ghost and can somehow pass visions through Ghost to Arya. What the fuck? I just stop recording just because of how terrible that was. But anyway, Arya gets the message and quickly rushes to the spot where the confrontation with Sansa's happening. She puts on one of her faces and ends up slipping into the group of people who are taking Sansa to King's Landing. Now, like I mentioned, Swiss cheese, there's so many holes in this leaks. I don't even want to go through and debate every single thing wrong with them. You guys, let's discuss that down below in the comment section. I'm going to wrap this video up by sharing with you guys some of my thoughts, theories, and just in general brainstorming about how creatures of the dead are reanimated in Westeros. Now, there are a lot of people who will tell you that there's no magic in Westeros, there's no gods, only just certain explanations for certain things that are happening. I'm one of the people who doesn't really think that that's the case. I think if we are being told that by certain people like George and maybe Dan and Dave, it's intentionally meant to mislead us so that when we do find out the truth, we can see, okay, they were kind of telling us the truth when saying that they're not real, but ultimately there is some sort of power and there's some sort of magic in Westeros that allows these things to happen. So during that thought process, of course, it brought me to each one of the living zombies who's not being controlled by the Night King on the TV show. We have, as of right now, Beric Dondarrion, Jon Snow, and then Gregor Clegane. By themselves, individually, it's not really anything too special. I guess when you look at it as a bigger picture, that's when more questions arise. But with Jon Snow, really what got me questioning about, his ability to survive certain situations, even before he became of the undead, it's just impossible for a character to survive that many times. And then we're told that there's no gods or anything like that, so there's nothing special about Jon Snow that's keeping him alive this long. Like I said before, that's super hard to believe, and I personally do not believe that. I think the only reason why Jon Snow has survived this long, even before actually being resurrected by R'hllor, is because he is one of the chosen ones who is destined to fight in the long night. And Jon Snow cannot die and stay fully dead and finally rest until his mission is complete. So maybe it was Melisandre's prayers that brought Jon Snow back, but ultimately it could have just been the fact that R'hllor wasn't done with him, and he cannot leave that plane of existence until his mission is complete, that mission being to kill the Night King. And when you look at Beric Dondarrion, the same can sort of be said for him. He's survived an insane amount of situations, mainly after he was resurrected the initial time, but who's to say that Thoros' prayer just sort of helped escalate things along? Maybe Beric has been chosen this entire time by R'hllor, and because his mission was not complete, which was to destroy the Night King, this is why he was brought back. And the same can be said for Beric. The two of them, their goal, they mentioned it in Game of Thrones Season 7, is to ultimately kill the Night King. And most likely when the Night King dies, Jon Snow and whatever magic is keeping him and Beric alive will most likely die with the Night King. What's the point of having them exist if their goal was to kill the Night King and now he's dead? Okay, so that sort of wraps up my brainstorming. I'll end it by saying that I don't really know where exactly Gregor the Mountain Clegane would fit into all this. There is no way in hell this bastard is a chosen one of R'hllor, and he has yet to do anything that proves he is. It's obvious he was reanimated by Qyburn in some sort of scientific way, but he's unlike any of the other existing whites. Like, he's not a fire white like Jon and Beric because he pretty much only serves Cersei and Qyburn, and he's not like the Army of the Dead because he does not serve the Night King. Well, on second thought, I guess he is similar to the Army of the Dead because he's obedient to one person and doesn't really seem to have free will. Oh man, I'm so sorry these thoughts are choppy and incomplete, but this is where I need your guys' help. Is there something in the water in Westeros? Is there something that certain characters ingest to make them come back? Or is it like The Walking Dead, where every single person who lives in Westeros can be brought back from the dead, and this is how the Night Kings do it? So it's almost like they're all carriers of a virus, and he activates this virus. And that may be the only true magic that the Night King possesses, other than manipulating ice. Oh man, so many questions, so little time. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. If you could please slap a like on this, as the like goal is going to be 420. Make sure you're subscribed, and then make sure you have your notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Super special shout out to Terry, Mario, Lynn Shaw, and Nancy. Without all of you all's love and support over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews, these kinds of videos would not be possible. Also, super special shout out to every single individual watching this video right now. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts Reviews.